All right, well, welcome to a new round of Groves. I hope you're excited about this semester and where we're going this winter as we talk about this next generation, Generation Z, and we unpack this. Hopefully this is something that intrigues you or you understand how essential it is for all of us, whether parents or grandparents or teachers or coaches or employees or employers or whatever it may be, that we all need to be equipped to better handle and lead and direct and guide this younger generation. And so I hope you're excited about where we're going. I hope you'll find it challenging. I hope you'll find it insightful. Really, the goal is for us to unpack each week in our Grove, as we've been saying, to talk about the two chapters that for each of the challenges that faces this most anxious generation, and for us to kind of talk about it and really try to figure it out for ourselves, and kind of in your small groups, in your groves, to really kind of wrestle with it and say, okay, well, how do we apply this? Because we don't want to just bring up issues and bring up problems. We want to try to find some solutions. And so, with this semester, it's going to look a little different. I'm going to tell you right out of the gates that this is not my area of expertise. So I do not claim to be an expert in Generation Z or on the younger generation and how to overcome their fears and their anxiety and all the issues facing them. And so I really feel like this is going to be a real group effort in the sense that we're really going to have to lean on each other, whether you're older and you're an empty nester or if you have young kids, that we're really going to have to kind of wrestle this thing to the ground together and really try to come up with some actual practical application of how we can minister and love and guide and direct this younger generation. So these videos are not going to be me trying to explain Generation Z to you, because that would just be stupid because I don't know. And I'm just as clueless as probably you are. And so that's why we're going to figure this thing out together. So in these videos, I'm going to be sticking to my lane. And that is, to me, is really helping us understand why we need to do this. And so, we're going to be unpacking this as we talk about it, but my part in this is really going to be bringing us back to the Bible and bring us back to God's Word in the midst of that. And so as we kick off this series with our first week this week, I want to propose a question to you and get you to consider a statement or the last statement in the entire Old Testament before we get to the New Testament, because I think it actually relates to what we're trying to do here with this semester of Groves. And if you don't know how the end of the Old Testament ends, it kind of ends in a not so great statement. It ends in kind of this like, oh, well, is there nothing coming after this? And I want to read it to you. It's in Malachi. This is the very last two verses of the entire Old Testament, okay? So this is how we wrap up the Old Testament. Malachi chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. It says this: "See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the hearts of the children to their parents. Or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction." The end. And then we go into 400 years where there's not a prophet speaking on God's behalf. 400 years is called the silent period, where God just kind of goes, okay, well, I've given you everything you need to know, so now just kind of wait. 400 years. And that's how it ends, saying, basically, did you catch it? He says, he will turn the hearts of their parents, or the parents to their children, and the hearts of the children to their parents. And when you read that statement, I don't know what it makes you think, but to me, it makes me think, well, what happened? What went wrong? Like, if the hearts of the parents are not on their children, then what are they on? What are the hearts of the parents on if they're not on their own kids? It's almost like they've given up on their kids. They're not really invested in their kids. But where's their heart? And my guess would be their heart is on themselves. It would be on, hey, what's in my best interest? What's good for me? I don't really care about the younger generation. I don't really care about the kids, because my heart is not on them. It's on me and what's best for me, and vice versa with the kids. The kids are like, I don't care what's going on with the older generation. I don't care what's going on with me, and I just want to make sure I'm taken care of. And that's how the Old Testament ends. And that's not really a great place to end. And if you it's very interesting, if you actually go to the opening of the New Testament, at least in Luke's gospel, he actually goes back and he ties in the beginning of the New Testament to this passage. And he says this is Zechariah. The angel of the Lord comes to Zechariah, who is John the Baptist's father, and tells him, hey, gives him this message in a sense. And he says this, talking about Zechariah's soon-to-be son, John the Baptist. He says this in chapter 1 of Luke, verse 16, "He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." And so Luke's making this connection. He's like, hey, John the Baptist's arrival and the arrival of Jesus, who John the Baptist is preparing the way for, is going to turn the hearts of the parents back to the kids. And I believe that's what Jesus wants to do with us. Because I feel like we're kind of on that threshold of being like the Malachi generation, where it's like, hey, the hearts of the parents is not on the kids. The hearts of the adults in our generation, our world today, is not really on the kids. It's really on themselves, on what satisfies them. If you kind of look at a lot of times this is not everybody, this is a generalization, but when you look at our culture, it really is, it's an adult-centered culture where we just kind of have with the kids. It's interesting, I'm going to use this example, you may not agree with it, but I was out in California last month to visit my mom, and I drove by my old high school. And my old high school, it was built in the late 80s or the mid 80s, and I graduated in 1989. And I think I've shared with you some of the stories about how I was in musical theater, but how we didn't really have a real theater. And so literally, like, you'd be on stage and you would go off stage and you would literally you'd be outside. So there was no like backstage like North Gwinnett Theater. There's this huge backstage area. Like, there was none of that. It was just walk off the stage outside. And the reason that's true is because my high school, Woodbridge High School, was built in the mid 80s. And in California, I remember as a kid, there was this proposition that went through all this stuff and voted on. It was called Proposition 13. And this was something that happened when I was a kid. And basically it was saying, we're going to take all this money away from the schools because we want to spend it on other things. That's the essence of it. And so they took this money out of education and they put it towards stuff for all the adults because they said, we don't really care about the kids. We want the money for other stuff. And the result of that was my high school was built right after Proposition 13. And so when I was in high school, we would go to Irvine High School, which was built before Proposition 13. And there was this massive, beautiful stage, just like there is at North Gwinnett, this big theater. And then here's my high school, and we got diddly squat. I mean, it was like nothing, okay? It was like going to the Taj Mahal and then going to the Slumdog Millionaire. I mean, it was like, this is a comparison of the two because the eyes of the adults wasn't on the kids, it was on themselves, and therefore the kids got less. And so to me, it was this example because when I went past the high school on this last trip, they're in the middle. Actually, it's almost completed. They finally are building a theater, like a real theater. And this is 30-something years later, they finally have the money to build them the theater that they should have had 30-something years ago, but they didn't because they took their eyes off of the kids. And so maybe you think that's legitimate or not, but my point is that when the eyes of the adults and the eyes of the parents are not on the kids and it's on themselves or what's in their best interest, then the kids suffer. And so my point is this, is that when we come to this series, my hope and my prayer is that God is going to turn the hearts of us, the parents, the grandparents, the teachers, the coaches, to these kids who are suffering from massive anxiety, massive stress, massive depression, all these different issues that they're facing. And for us not just to write them off and say, whatever, they're just a bunch of whiners. No, to say, well, what can we do to help raise up this generation? What can we do to invest in this next generation? What can we be doing? Practical things that we can be doing to help these kids, whether they're our own kids or our own grandkids or the other kids in our church that we have taken responsibility for, and saying, what can we do as a community? What can we do as individuals? What can we do as parents? What can we be doing to invest in this generation and help them and keep our eyes on them? Because I believe that Jesus has come, like Luke noticed, and he's come to turn the eyes of the parents back to their kids and to turn the eyes of the kids back to the parents. And I believe that starts with us. That starts with Rising Church. And so that's my hope and prayer. I hope this is going to be a great study. It may be a little bit different again. It may be challenging. You may like it. You may not like it. But I hope that we will endure and we'll push through, that we'll do the homework assignments, we'll read the chapters, and then we'll come together and we'll discuss and we'll kind of rub off on each other and kind of say, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? And will this work? Will this work? And we'll come up with some practical applications for how we can do this. So I hope we're going to be off to a great start. I want to say good luck. I'm going to stick to my lane, and hopefully we're going to let Tim Elmore and the wisdom that we learned from the book to really kind of express itself through our discussion. So my prayers are with you. I hope this is going to be a great start, and we'll see you next week.